made from organic material. It's made from plants.
Right.
It is plants which has been marinated, so to speak, under very high heat and pressure.
Right.
And very specific conditions, but also lack of oxygen. And so what's in the oil is nothing else than what you find in plants, just in much more concentrated form.
Right.
It has been transformed. Okay. Now, raw oil, number one, Vaseline and mineral oil is pure raw oil.
Yeah.
Cooked in a refinery. It has different strata. On the bottom you would have, I think it's asphalt and things you're using on the roof.
Uh-huh.
You know, the heaviest.
The heaviest stuff, yeah.
And then it goes lighter and lighter and lighter, and at some point in that column, when you cook it,
Mm-hmm.
you would have the base for gasoline for cars.
Okay.
Now, the gasoline for cars from the raw oil is not inherently toxic. It's actually the additives which makes it toxic. And the burning of it is what's creating the carbon dioxide, which is not toxic, but it's creating the heating of the earth, right?
Right.
So, it is poisonous things in the raw oil, but the effect of it is absolutely minor. As an example, would you be afraid of walking across the parking lot or on the sidewalk?
No.
No. What is it made from? Asphalt, right?
Right, right.
Okay. Will you go barefooted? Have any doctor told you to not go barefooted on the sidewalk?
No.
No. So, not only that, but when the oil comes out, all the very volatile parts of the oil would immediately evaporate. So a lot of it is just gone in a few hours.
Right.
Then it gets more and more thicker and thicker. Then microbes start eating on it. It's actually food for a lot of different microbes, okay? So they start eating on it. Then you have other reactions. You know, the sun is baking it. You got the churning action by the ocean and all of that. In the end, the oils end up like small pellets, almost indistinguishable from small stones. The rest is eaten by bacteria, evaporated, or just disappears. Okay. What happened in the Mexican Gulf is like I'm spitting in an Olympic pool. Okay. That's the impact. Okay. And the future is going to prove me right. In 1 year, you would have a hard time finding the oil anywhere. Okay. And even when the oil hits the wetlands, what's going to happen is that it might have, if it's a lot of it, and it's suffocating, so it ends up suffocating the oxygen and all that to the roots, and you might have certain areas which would be more vulnerable. But overall, the oil will actually cause more plant growth than before. It would actually work as a fertilizer, and which also could be negative, because if it gets too much algae and bacteria and biomass in the water, and you take away the temporary fertilization happening from the oil, that can also create oxygen starvation. Okay, and you have a backlash from that. And on top of everything else, an experiment was done in Norway when I grew up there. A smart man, right? Some really good thinking guy. Said, you know what? Why don't you take some of that raw oil and pour it on the top of the aquarium, which they have at the Oceanographic Institute in Bergen, Norway. It's a world famous oceanographic. Why don't we test it out to see actually the effect of it, right? That's real science, right? Instead of speculation.
Right, right.
Okay. So, and that would be the worst conditions possible, because I would pour like I don't know how thick it was, but a half an inch or inch thick with oil. no wave action, right?
Right. Right.
Nowhere to go, and making a roof on that
Right.
aquarium, which had fresh ocean water going in and out of it. Okay, so it mimics, the ocean. Okay,
Right. Right.
and the most vulnerable part of it, which would be the shoreline, right? Just
Mhm.
a few feet deep on the shoreline,
Right.
with all the crabs
And everything in there. Yeah.
fish, all of that. I can't recall anymore. I tried to look it up on the internet, but I couldn't find it, the report, because it's probably never been published on the internet.
Mhm.
Because it was back in maybe like 72, 71 or
Oh
something.
yeah.
They could not prove any damage to it, except for some, in one of few fishes was somewhat elevated level of carbons, okay? After it had been sitting on that aquarium for, I would say, several weeks. They're testing it out. Now,
Right.
you take the oil and you let it out in the middle of the ocean. The average person doesn't have any idea how big the ocean is, right?
Right. Right.
So, the worst part of the oil spill in the Mexican Gulf
Mhm.
is that all that oil goes to waste.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
That's the worst part of it.
Yeah.
It's not desirable. It has negative impacts
Mhm.
on shore and on the surface of the ocean. But the impact is minor. And if we had shot this immediately when that happened, I could have predicted to you in detail what would happen in the mass media about this. Because in the beginning, they had actually a couple of experts who actually told the reporter that it has a damage, but the damage is going to be very minor, okay?
Right.
Actually talking the truth, right?
Yeah.
But that was not enough for the mass media to keep your attention, right?
Right.
To make a crisis out of it and showing their power to manipulate again.
Mhm.
So they stopped doing that. In fact, at least one of those experts who said exactly that, as he was interviewed over and over again, start sounding exactly like everybody else how bad it was.
Oh.
But I remember.
He changed his story.
Yeah, he changed his story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the whole thing is a gigantic fraud. And then you have political groups who would gain on creating all this fear, but also try to damage the administration and Obama, of course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's political interests here. Of course, the coast states down to Louisiana, whatever, Florida,
Mhm.
I don't know, Texas too, maybe, or Mississippi.
Yeah.
They would also wanted to make it as bad as possible because they wanted to get as much money as possible for the government.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then nobody wants to work down there, right? So, I'm a fisherman. I can't go out and fish now, so I got to get reimbursement.
Yeah. They just started the $20 billion fund.
Right. So the whole thing is that it is a typical example where the mass media has created a hysteria. Even if they know and does it on purpose, I would say right now that if the person who sees this and finds out in 1 year and 2 years that Jim Larsson was right,
Yes.
okay, then they should give the credit to me, and they should stop voting for those politicians who created this hysteria.
Right.
And the lie and the fraud is a gigantic fraud with incredible consequences, what's going on, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the reporters and the stations who's been reporting and fueled this hysteria, they also should be boycotted for committing fraud to the American people.
Right.
Right? Okay. So, this it is actually a fantastic example where the mass media can create something which has no or very little tiny foundation in reality, in truth, then completely distort it into hysteria and mass psychosis for their own benefit, fueled by, quote, the subconscious conspiracy of politicians and well-meaning idiots who doesn't know what they're talking about either. Okay? And nobody actually is checking the truth about the story, to the point that it becomes politically incorrect
to go against it.
To go against it.
Yeah.
Is the emperor without clothing all over again. Even the president doesn't have the guts to say the truth anymore.
Yeah.
So here you have a whole population who's walking down a path of idiocy, not founded on truth, right?
Yeah.
And making all kind of profound, dire decisions about this and that, and huge amount of resources being used, careers being destroyed, people going to jail, political upheaval, complete distortion of reality, with no consequence to the people who's behind the lie, the fraud.
Yeah. I could just imagine Obama getting on TV during a State of the Union address or from the Oval Office and saying, "Oh, it's not that bad. Don't worry about it so much." Then that would have been suicide.
You know what? What he needs to do is to talk the truth, okay? He has to do it. Forget about the political correct. Because I'm absolutely convinced that he knows the truth about that oil spill.
Yes.
That's why he was not as angry as everybody wanted him to become. Because his own experts told him that this oil is going to be absorbed by the ocean and evaporating and eaten by microbes.
Sure.
And been made completely neutralized in just a few days, okay? So, oil spill is bad. It does have some negative consequences for the small patch of the ocean.
Yeah.
Some negative consequence here and there on shore. But it is just a thousandth of the fraction of how it's being presented by the mass media and what the average person is led to believe.
Right. Wow. Thanks for that very enlightening discussion, Jim.
This conversation about this, I know I'm right. I know I'm 100% right, and the future will prove me right. And so, anybody who listens to this, they have to ask themselves, what else kind of manipulation am I subject to, which is distorting my reality and make me to an irrational human being, okay?
Right.
So I'm no longer able to see the real reality, so I'm making the wrong choices in my life, believe the wrong things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, we have, you've been typing it, so you know.
Yeah.
We have a lot of examples of this, okay?
Sure.
So it would be a very enlightening experience for everybody picking up this book to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Because talking about the oil, that's just a tiny, tiny tip of the iceberg. You know what I mean?
Sure.